Hey everyone, Rick here, and folks, welcome to the Caverns of Undeath. If you've been watching my videos for even a little while now, you know that I have been working on this scenario, and we've mostly just been waiting for components to arrive. Things like upgraded resource tokens, some really sweet silver and gold coins. We have also been waiting because we've decided to arbitrarily populate the caverns. Well, by we I mean me, entirely with the WizKids boneyard figures. So we've been waiting on those to be released, and they're finally here. And now we can finally start to describe what exactly this is. Well, it's a sandbox, role-playing game, tactical war game hybrid situation. Basically a huge 3D board game. It definitely has some role-playing aspects, but it's a system of my own design. I love coming up with stats and different ways to play. So essentially, you are going to play a character. Now, this is GM-less, DM-less. There is no dungeon master. I'm a player, an adventurer, just like everyone else. But you will have an adventurer. You can choose someone if you start out very common looking. You start out with clothing and a dagger, essentially. So you may not look this cool right off the bat. So if you want to pick a miniature that looks more like a typical peasant to start out with, go ahead. And then just keep grabbing a cooler and cooler looking figure as you are constantly leveling up. So here, we'll go into these tables in just a little bit. So basically, the way this works is there's a day phase for everybody who's playing and a night phase. Keep track of days of the week as well, because we're going to have to pay rent at the local inn if you don't own a home, for example. People can have their own homesteads if they spend enough money. You'll be acquiring money. We've gone through this in a different video, but essentially there's several different ways you can acquire money. And when I mentioned that it's like a 3D board game, this whole above ground area is honestly completely unnecessary. It's basically eye candy, visual appeal, though it does kind of serve a purpose as that 3D game board. If my adventurer is going into the city to look at the message boards, to maybe take a quest could be, go hunt the giant in the southwestern hills, or go put a stop to the druid ceremony taking place at the ruins, or any number of things. There's a bear harassing fishermen. There are dryads in the marsh, a necromancer harassing people with by constantly resurrecting their relatives or something. So on a game turn, you'll stick your adventure in one of these places, at the message boards, in the market to sell goods. If you're going to go to your room at night in the inn, or if you don't have enough money to spend, you'll just have a bedroll in a campsite, go somewhere else. If you want to make money, though, you are going to have to work for it. So that could be helping out, gathering crops, or going down into the mines to mine for iron, or going fishing, or chopping wood, or going hunting for deer or elk. So, what happens when you actually go attempt to do something like this? Well, every skill you have, farming, fishing, hunting, cutting wood, mining, it's all skill-based. You'll be going down the polyhedral die line. Starting with a d20, you have 30 seconds, real-time rolling, to roll as many 20s as you can. Obviously, that's not going to be easy. So you go 30, 29, 28, 27, and you'd obviously have a timer going, and people can be doing this simultaneously depending on what they're trying to do. Let's say I'm trying to cut wood, and so I'm trying to get a 20, and eventually, hopefully, I'll either get a 20 or I won't. Every success rolled is one good. So let's say I rolled a 20, boom, and I was chopping wood. So now I have this in my inventory. What can I do with that? Well, on my next turn, maybe I want to chop wood again. Because I was successful in chopping wood, my skill in chopping wood has gone up. So I would go to a D12 this time. So next turn when I want to chop wood, 30 seconds, now I have a 1 in 12 chance of being successful rather than a 1 in 20 chance. Oh, there was one success. So you keep doing that. Every success you get is more wood. So let's say I was 2 times successful at that point. So now look, my inventory of wood is kind of filling. I mean, you do have, I don't know, how best to what kind of order I should go in when explaining this, but basically when you start out, again, you have clothing and a dagger. You also have a set of stats. You have an attack, a defense, a speed, and a health. You have 24 points to divide between those 4 stats. Your defense stat is also your carrying capacity in pounds, and each resource gathered weighs a certain amount. So, you just have to make sure that you weren't over encumbered, or you'd have to leave some of that behind. So in this instance, though, let's say we were carrying 3 pieces of wood. Every day or week, we are going to reset the market to see how much each of these goods is worth. So, for example, meat today is going to be worth 3 silver. Fish is 3 silver. People are hungry for meat and fish. 3 silver today. Wood is 2 silver. Iron and crops are 1 silver apiece. Well, we happen to have 3 wood here, so on our turn we are going to go to the market, sell these 3 wood at $2 a piece. That's 6 silver, or 5 gold and a silver. So look at that, boom, we just made that much money. So what can we do with all this money? Well, here's where the charts come into play. All these different weapons have a various cost and weight. Of course, you can also have your armor, or you can go to the blacksmith. That's another space on this 3D table where you can improve your weapons, improve your armor. There is also a wizard in that wizard's tower on the wall who will help you get better in magic and also enchant your weapons as well. So depending on which route you want to take, there are so many different options. So we just made some money, and that could be, and of course it just depends. Now, if I want to go hunting, well, I'm going to start back over at a 20 again. But you always keep track of your skill level. So every time you are successful, you move up down a die, essentially. Because obviously it gets easier and easier to get successes the lower the die. So we were successful once with chopping wood, so we moved to a D12. Next time, we were also successful chopping wood the second time. So if we ever decide to chop wood a third time, we'll be rolling a D10 and then a D8. But of course now, if we want to go mining, well, we haven't done that yet. We're not experienced. We're going to start at a D20 again. So obviously you can say, well, why not just keep chopping wood and get all the way down to a D4? Well, sometimes, depending on what the market looks like, it may only be worth 1 point apiece. So you may want to be well-rounded so that when you do these various tasks, you'll have, a variety of options depending on how the market is looking at the time. But anyway, so that's how you'll gather resources. That's one of the ways you can make money. Another way is to go out on these quests. So what happens if I take a turn, I go to the market or to the bulletin board, the message boards. Okay, there's a message to go to a bandit camp and clear out the bandits. Fantastic. So the way that works is essentially, you would take your adventurer, go put them near the bandit camp. Okay, here's where I'm taking my turn. And now we are going to come over here to the actual combat table, the actual combat grid. Here's the grid when we are going to be taking combat actions in the cavern. Here's the combat grid when we take a combat action anywhere outdoors. We'll start in one of the 4 spaces, and the fantastic thing about this, how sandboxy it is, you can absolutely team up with other players, so 3 or 4 or 5 of you, or 2 of you, or just you by yourself can go on these quests. And the variety and difficulty of opponents is going to vary depending on how many of you there are, but you'll simply start in one of the center spaces. Everything else is randomly generated. On this 12 by 12, we'll be rolling a d12 column and then row, let's say, to start putting this terrain out here. So a 5 and a 10. So we would go to the 5th row and all the way down to the 10th, or the 5th column all the way down to the 10th row. That's where that would be. Next up, 2 and 12, so 2 and 12, and then we would orient that thing in a direction of like 1, 2, 3, 4. So we would put that like that, and the rest of this stuff would be randomly placed as well, and then depending on who we're fighting, we would roll to see where they would go, and of course the amount of opponents. In this case, let's say there are a couple bandits, so boom, here we go. We now have randomly generated this encounter, and hopefully we will end up being successful. Again, your attributes are attack, defense, speed, and health. So speed is going to be the amount of spaces you can move in a turn. In a combat scenario like this, you have 2 actions, attack and move. And you can do up to 2 of those in any order. So you can attack, attack, move, move, attack, move, attack. However you want to do that. The way an attack would work, let's say, if we were adjacent, we didn't have a ranged weapon, we had to attack adjacently. We would take a look at what weapon we have. Now, we could maybe have multiple weapons. That is another action you can take instead of moving or attacking, which would be to switch weapons. Why might you want to do that? Well, maybe you want to shoot a bow and arrow from afar for a while, and then when the AI opponent moves towards you into close combat, well, you don't want to use that bow and arrow anymore, so you'll take an action to swap out for maybe a sword and a shield or a 2-handed spear or what have you. So there's a variety of weapons, and it'll tell you how many hands it takes to wield, but more importantly is the attack die. As you can see, the better the weapon, the bigger the attack die. So you add the result. Let's say we had a hand axe. So we have a D6 hand axe. We're going to, let's say we made our attack attribute. Don't forget, you split 24 points between attack, defense, speed, and health. Let's say we made our attack a 6. Let's say we made everything a 6. So then our attack is a 6 plus, ooh, nice, a 6 is a 12. So now the defender is going to roll their armor. And so let's say this bandit just had clothing, so its defense die is a d4. So in order to, let's say his stat was like, I don't know, well, let's give him something a little better than that. Let's say he was also a d6. Let's say he had hide armor and he was a defense value of like 8 or something like that. So 8 plus this, 8 plus 4 is 12. He would have blocked the shot, equal to or above a defense roll. But let's say he did not block that, and our attack got through. At that point, we would take a look at what a hand axe does in terms of wound dice, and it would be 6d6. So we would grab our wound dice and just dump out some of those here and roll these. And for a hand axe, 66 hit wounding on a 5 or better. So you basically have a 1 in 3 chance of wounding here. So hopefully we'll get at least 2 wounds on average on this attack. 5s or better. Nope, we didn't roll a single 5. How about again? There we go. So there we have 4 wounds, 2 5s and 2 6s. And then that hide armor for the orc is a 6, so he would take any wounds that happened, and then his armor roll would be saves on 6s, and he rolled none, so he would take 4 wounds, and you'd see how many wounds that thing had left, and either it would be dead or you'd continue on combat. But that's an example of how an encounter works and how you may want to split up your stats differently based on what you want to do. Do you want to have more HP? Do you want to have a higher chance of hitting, a higher carrying capacity on defense? And of course, all of this stuff matters, because every time you kill someone, you'll get one of these very cool skulls. And then you can trade a number of these skulls in. Essentially, they're like experience points. And you can level up, and leveling up will let you boost up those stats. So you're like, oh, You know, this 6 attack really sucks. Well, the more experience you get, the more you can boost your attack up. And also improve your weapons and armor. So a bunch of different weapon and armor improvements are like you can increase the amount of wound dice you roll instead of 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. Temper allows you to increase your attack or defense die level. So that's like, you know, we had that hand axe that was rolling a d6, but if we temper it, we can boost it up. You have to go in order. So it was already a d6. So then we would go to d8. So it'd be 3 gold to make that hand axe a d8 attack die instead. And the same thing goes for armor as well. The armor save roll even. Armor improvements. So you can boost your armor up. And so some of these are really interesting. So you take a speed test, which is roll your speed or roll below your speed in order to reroll your defense dice, or a defense test to reroll defense dice, or reroll armor saves of 1. So these various armor improvements allow you to manipulate the dice in different ways, but the really cool part is the magic. If you have a magic staff, which is the last thing on this weapons table, starts out as a d4, but you can train with the wizard. You start out as a whelp, but for this various costs, you have to go in order. That attack die will keep going up and up and up, and it'll give you a special ability, a single spell cast, or magic die reroll. So what does all that mean? Well, if you look at the magic spells, so you do the attack roll off again, just like with a weapon. So you'll be rolling your d4, d6, add it to your attack value, and then see if you can beat the defender's defense die roll added to their defense attribute. And if you do, then you roll a number of dice, a number of d6 equal to your attack value. So like we were attack value of 6. So that means we would roll 6 dice. And depending on what we got, if we got a 6 of a kind, we just cast Inferno level 4, which means we would roll a d12 to see how many automatic wounds take place. Well, you know, depending on the armor save. Or a 2 pair, or a full house, or a small straight. Whatever the case may be, will be a different magic spell effect. And yeah, it's just freaking awesome. I just love dice allocation, so that was a big part of this. So again, choosing where you go and picking out one of those quests to do will allow you to also get gold and notoriety and fame. Above ground and doing odd jobs will get you gold, because the whole point, what are you doing all this for? Well, eventually you are going to want to go below ground and into the caverns. That's the focus of the game of Caverns of Undeath, is to eventually solve the mystery of the caverns. Starting here, now you are going to be using your speed attribute to move through this terrain. Doors cost 1 extra to move through. Whenever you stop, whether that's voluntary or you run out of movement points, you run into a dungeon encounter. And so that's going to be on this thing. You'll roll for terrain placement just like you did above ground. This time this is a 10 by 10, so you would roll a 10-sided die to figure out where all this was. And then, of course, the enemies are going to be all different types of undead, and you'll roll for their placement as well. And again, if you venture down here in a party, there will be multiple of you, and you'll basically use one figure as the party marker wherever you end up. And that's because you only move as fast as your slowest person. And so whenever you stop, depending on what level of the cavern you're in, will determine what opponents you face. So here in this kind of dungeony first part might just be some basic skeletons or zombies. And then we enter into this first large room. And so the monsters, the beasts, will be a little more tough. Now you can maybe take a boat, which is again going to be counted per space. The larger spaces are 2, because maybe you want to go that way instead of this way. Either way, there are going to be tougher opponents the further along you get. until eventually there's going to be some puzzles to solve, like how in the world do you, I assume that's where you need to go. Of course, you'll have rumors and all kinds of things that'll kind of point you in the direction, but eventually, hopefully, you will have found some of these. I know this is full of spoilers. They snap right on here. As soon as you find both of them, this thing lifts up, and now you can head through there and into here. It's one of those situations where it's like, I'm not giving away everything, but I kind of want to at least explain a little bit of how this works. Eventually, there will be a way to douse those flames, and then you'll have to maybe have found a little tiny book, which you'll stick into one of these mouths, and that'll release that door. In here, there may be someone to fight, maybe another puzzle where you'll have to lift this thing and maybe drop something in there, which will trigger this to move, and then there's stairs down, which will lead into the catacombs. And maybe there's something behind these walls, and there's a bunch of bone piles that probably have something to do with something. But anyway, the whole point is you're not going to get through this thing right away. Not unless you spend like several sessions leveling up, getting better equipment, doing a lot of odds and end jobs, and then coming down here. But more than likely, you'll do some of that. Get a few better weapons and armor, and then you want to test them out. So you come down in here, and again, as soon as you run out of movement points, it's an encounter. Then you move a little further, then it's an encounter. Then you move a little further, then it's an encounter. And then eventually you're like, I don't know if we want to press our luck any further. Let's go back out and resupply. Of course, after doing all that, you have leveled up more than likely and also gotten some loot. And so then you'll come back out here, spend your loot on better weapons and armor, and maybe do some more odd jobs, maybe some harder jobs that you may not have thought or feasible originally, and then you'll level up some more better weapons and armor. Okay, now let's go back down here. We're better supplied. I bet we can make it a little bit further this time. Now, night and day doesn't matter underground. Your adrenaline's pumping. There are opportunities to rest with, you'll have a bedroll on you potentially, but there are chances for encounters if you try to go to sleep down here. It's not as imperative to sleep down here, though resting is definitely helpful, as it is above ground, where night and day are going to make a difference, and there are tables you'll roll on to see if what happens to you. So there's 3 ways you can go to sleep at night. You can camp out with a bedroll, you can rent a room, and there's different rates for renting a room in an inn, and your stuff is going to be safer if you're at an inn, but your stuff is even more safe if you have a homestead. And this is just fun because who doesn't want to have a homestead? So eventually you're going to have so much money that you're going to want to buy a homestead. So here's just an example. You know me, I have so much terrain. You can have any house you want. This is just an example miniature building authority house. That way your stuff is the most secure, and you can upgrade it. So you can upgrade it with some stables, let's say. And now you can have your own animals, which you can also harvest. Or maybe you want to harvest some crops, so you'll have your own fields. Now this you do not roll on. This is all happening no matter where you are. This is in addition. You can take odds and ends jobs in the overland, cutting down trees or mining or whatever, but every week your homestead is going to produce goods for you based on your upgrades. So if you upgraded your homestead with a field, it's going to produce a certain amount of crops every week. If you upgraded your homestead with a stable for animals, you'll get a certain amount of meat every week. You can upgrade it with things like a well, which may have some kind of different effect. Or have your own blacksmith, where the rates may be cheaper or doesn't take as much, or you can maybe use your own iron that you mined to do that. So, and there's more than that too. You could have a fishing pond. You can have all sorts of things. which will generate fish for you, for example. So buying your own homestead's fantastic, but until then, you'll probably be renting rooms to keep your surplus supplies, because if you cut down a whole bunch of trees and wood in the market is not going for a whole lot right now, you'll want a place to store it. Obviously, a homestead would be the safest, an inn is the next safest, and last resort is a campsite. And at night, you may be harassed by bandits. But if you leave your campsite during the day with stuff there, there's a chance it'll get stolen. So again, this whole above ground area is just eye candy. All this terrain is miniature building authority right here. A lot of this is Eslo terrain. The mat is a Frontline Gaming F.A.T mat. Eslo terrain, this is all everything you see I didn't touch. This is all pre-painted stuff. The rivers, the roads, that's all Eslo terrain as well. Of course, the dungeons are all Dwarven Forge. All of this is resin catacombs sets, which are just freaking gorgeous, right? And then just the classic room and passage style sets. They're resin original cavern sets. Actually, this is not resin. This is Dwarvenite. Dwarvenite volcanic cavern pieces. But then this is back to resin for the Den of Evil room set. So, yeah, that's basically how it goes. There will be boss encounters down here as well. Like, each main section has a boss. So before you leave that section, a boss encounter will take place. But, yeah, I just love the idea of harvesting goods, selling them for money, and then just all these options of weapons and armor and all the different ways to improve it. Look at all these armor options. The armor saves, the cost, the weight. But these improvements are what's actually really cool. So you can improve even the shittiest weapon and armor into an amazing weapon or armor. So maybe you want that dagger, because a dagger's fantastic. A dagger gives you an armor save of 6 with a parry. So maybe you want to do that, or you know what, and then just keep improving those daggers. So then you can be double fisted with daggers, amazing daggers with a parry save. 2 daggers would give you the ability to parry on 5s instead of 6s. But yeah, it just gets better and better. And then you throw in magic into the mix, then you can start enhancing your weapons with magic runes. Natural 6s explode, pairs explode, reroll attack dice, extra attack die, and roll 2 but choose the higher. So many options. And that's another thing. Going to the Wizard's Tower is a spot on the board. So again, this is all just for eye candy, but it also does serve a function. Move into the message boards, move to the market, move to the Wizard's Tower, move to the fields to harvest, move to the woods to chop wood. Each action takes a turn unless you're in the same area. So like within the city, you can move around at will. It's just all within a day or night phase. Moving between fields and farms out here is 1 turn. Moving to an objective to do a quest is a turn. But all the combat still takes place on these smaller tactical battle maps, randomly generated. There's AI for the monsters, so typically it's does it have a ranged weapon? Then it shoots. If it doesn't have a target, it moves closest to the weakest opponent and shoots. Or if it's melee, moves toward the weakest opponent and attacks. Or is it already adjacent to an opponent, it attacks? Is it adjacent to 2 opponents, both with the same amount of HP? Then it's a roll-off to see who it targets. So it's very simple AI. But yeah, so there's just a lot of fun in terms of the different combats, getting money, getting a homestead essentially. And yeah, I know I was probably all over the place because there's so much to talk about. I know I didn't even talk about everything, but that's just kind of an overview. I know it's a half-hour long overview, but finally I wanted to get this recorded because I know a lot of people have been like, I can't wait to hear about this. I can't wait to hear about this. I know I've been waiting for it too, but here it is. This is what it looks like. I may end up recording a session or two. How cool would that be? All right, folks, let me know if you're interested in seeing something like that as well. And if you made it to the end, congratulations, you are my favorite. And I appreciate you all, though, for watching, no matter how much. And until next time.